it's hopefully going to be an interesting discussion today. As Miss Lois was kind of commenting at the beginning, before everyone got on, today's topic, I actually found very interesting. When I really was thinking about how do we properly interpret the theme of caregiving, and I think that care is pretty important, right? It's like the core concept behind caregiving. So I felt like it was only appropriate that we discuss what the term care actually means. But if you're not sure what I'm talking about, let me go ahead and show you our quote of the day and the handout as a whole. And something that I felt like was really important, especially for us as writers, was to consider here what Eduardo Galeano is saying, and especially as it relates to words, right? So today we have here, it's like a little mini prose piece, sort of like a prose poem. It's called Ventana sobre la Palabra, número tres. And in the original Spanish, he wrote, En la lengua guaraní, ñe significa palabra y también significa alma. Creen los indios guaraníes que quienes mienten la palabra o la dilapidan son traidores del alma. And the translation that I provided for you guys today, I translated it as window into the word. In the Guarani language, ñe means word, and it also means soul. The Guarani people believe that those who lie against the word or squander it are traitors against the soul. Now this quote comes from one of my new books that I bought while in Mexico. And let me copy and paste that in here for you. It actually comes from this book right here called Las Palabras Andantes. So if y'all are interested, I definitely recommend it. I've enjoyed every piece that I've read in here so far. And as a lot of you know, I really like Eduardo Galeano. I think he's an amazing writer, Uruguayan novelist, journalist. And I would call him like just poet, But yeah, what he writes here is interesting. And I think that it kind of says a little bit about, how serious maybe we need to take the word, right? But what do y'all think about what Eduardo Galeano wrote? What does this particular quote say to you?
Just handle it carefully.
Handle it carefully. Yeah.
But I didn't get the the meaning of it. Soul and one is word.
Yeah.
And when I first read it, I was thinking about the word in the Bible. And then when how do you say, mishandle it? You're not supposed to add to it or take from it. And so that's where I thought it was going, but it didn't.
No, but that's an interesting, comparison, right? I think, like, coming from a Christian background, that definitely could be a way to think about the word. I saw Kathy, then Abraham, then Mauricio. Kathy?
Thank you. I was thinking of Don Miguel Ruiz's 4 agreements where he says, be impeccable with your word. And the idea of words having power, connecting it to the soul makes me want to be more conscious about how I use my words. It kind of hit me hard.
It's kind of funny that you would bring up the 4 agreements, because Vero did too in the chat. And that's definitely.
Oh my
Yeah,
God!
and it's definitely, I think, it's like, it is important, right? And maybe what Eduardo Galeano wrote is very similar to the 4 agreements and the idea of being impeccable. Right? Abraham?
I do like the concept, but I wish it was more like intent instead of soul, because sometimes it doesn't have correct boundaries, and people interpret it the way they want it, and intent feels like it's something that's right on the money.
Yeah, maybe, Although it is interesting that, at least according to Eduardo Galeano, right, Ñe'e in Guarani means both word and soul. So for their culture, that if that's in fact true, there's definitely this correlation between word and soul, or what we would identify as a soul. So there's for sure, I think, something there that could be related. But yeah, I mean, if you feel like intent would be maybe another way to interpret the quote, there's probably like maybe the second part of what he writes, perhaps. Mauricio?
To me, it made me think about the spirituality that lies in all of us, into honoring, how even something as maybe as mundane as our voice has power, something that we don't understand. But it also got me thinking about like how we can kind of morph that into something that's less, I guess, or something evil. We can change those words, as the second part of Galeano's quote said. And I'm curious if it comes from the same place where those words came, wouldn't that also make it come from the same spiritual place? That was the question I had. But I mean, yeah, I like the connotation that what we speak has power, because it comes from a place, like a spiritual place inside of us, and it kind of talks about like that essence being in all of us, regardless of whatever earthly caste or class we are.
Yeah, that's
when he
interesting.
said that, reminds me of, how do you say, speaking things into the atmosphere.
Mhm.
And like Catherine says, you have to watch our words.
Mhm. Yeah, the thoughts that we put into the world, can manifest, right? If they're bad thoughts, that we express through negative words, the negativity might return to us. Same with the positive, right? If we have positive thoughts, positive words that we use in describing a situation, the situation might turn into a positive one for us. Ani's observation of the chat, I think, is also interesting in that, perhaps if the word is an outward expression of what's inside of us, then we are susceptible to lying and misrepresenting what's inside of us through our words if we don't use the correct word, right? So in that sense, maybe that's what Eduardo Galeano is saying, and that the person that uses the wrong word or belies the word or squanders the word, is a traitor to their own soul. So like, yeah, it can definitely be very spiritual and very metaphysical in I think in a way that probably speaks more to us as writers than anyone else. At least, that's what I'm imagining.
Misrepresentation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mauricio, thank you. I appreciate you manifesting a tequila shot. That will definitely happen later. But I think that one of the things that at least I've tried to sort of impart on everyone is, as writers and especially as poets, you have to be very conscious of the words that you use, because every word has more than one meaning, right? We might understand a word for the connotation, right? The implied meaning of a word, like caregiving. But if we break apart the word and we understand it as the giving of care, well then we need to understand what care is, right? And the definition of care is very interesting, and I'm trying to build up to that. But I definitely want to make sure that all of you are at least kind of understanding what Eduardo Galeano is saying to us. Tina, I see you raised your hand. Or David.
I don't know if this is the same thing, but I get really picky about when words are pronounced wrong. And the two big pet peeves are supposedly, when it's supposed to be supposedly,
Uh-huh.
and library. They really annoy me. Anyway, so I think that same thing, because you're talking about a spiritual way, but I'm thinking, I'm thinking to myself, to the person, do you know how you sound when you say those words? And maybe nobody notices but me, but if you're in education, you shouldn't be mispronouncing, like library, whatever, people are going to miss that extra R. But when I hear that other word, and I hate it so much, but the funny thing is, today in the one of the classes, there's 3 boys in this class, this special ed class, but when somebody pronounces that word wrong, because I'm, with the 8 in the class, I'm going to tell them how it's said. So all the boys are like, no, supposedly is a word, supposedly, and it's just to annoy me. And it's kind of funny. That's the only time it's funny. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, it sounds like, in that particular situation, it can be very, people can make light of it. One thing that I do have to say, though, about the mispronunciation of words and that kind of idea, the idea, at least, around, what our perceptions are. As a person that didn't grow up speaking English at home all the time, and having to learn pronunciation and enunciation, to become better equipped to communicate with English speakers, it's a struggle. And there's really, when it comes to communication and language, I think that if the way you're saying it conveys the emotion and the intent behind it, the way it's said may not necessarily be, at least in relation to Eduardo Galeano's quote, it might not necessarily be traitorous to our soul, right? If it's, I think, more traitorous to your soul, spiritually speaking, if you use the wrong word and you basically don't live up to your word. I think that has much larger ramifications than a mispronunciation. But I get you, Tina. I get what you're saying, especially in certain contexts,
And jalapeno makes me annoyed too. And people who are cooking on a show and they go, we're going to cut up this jalapeno.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. I could definitely understand that. I saw that Vero had raised her hand, and then Mauricio. Vero, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I think I was going to say something similar to what you said, but I think that especially for non-native English speakers, I think that the English language and the the indoctrination of the appropriate enunciation of the language was like a very violent experience for me. So much so that I learned how to speak English and I lost the language with which my mom loved me in, which was Spanish, which was also not perhaps her native language. And so just wanted to, just raise the point that it's for me, and especially growing up in, South Central, I grew up speaking more slang in Spanish and non-validated languages. And, people telling me like, that's not a real language, or teachers telling me like in classrooms, like speak English. And so just wanting to just emphasize that for me, after I became an adult, I even rejected English. And I was like, English breaks its own rules, like, half the time. And I'm supposed to memorize all these rules to fit in this, in this category of like a proper English speaker, or someone that's more acceptable or more
Yeah.
able to fit into this society that rejects me in every other way. So for me, it was almost like a big fuck you. Like, I don't want to speak your language. I don't want to speak English. I'd rather, uh, like reject everything about like, the Americanized concept of being American, and with that came language. So just to emphasize, like, this is, for me, the way I took it was more about like what what is the word and the energy that you're putting out, and what are you manifesting in that reality of what you're saying, whether negative or positive, than the pronunciation or how well you enunciate your words.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree, Vero. And Abraham, I think, makes also a great point in the chat. A language spoken poorly or incorrectly is still a language. I think it is more behind the idea behind the words you're using, and the intention of it, which is, to maybe tie it back to the Eduardo Galeano quote, it might be more like that is the soul, right? The soul is maybe speaking in the way that it wants to speak, and that's perfect, right? There's no imperfect way of speaking, in at least the way in which it's communicating, right? If it's effective and impeccable, even, it's still gonna be the correct way of saying something. Mauricio, and then I saw that Kathy also had her hand.
I was gonna say something, but then like I got caught up in what Vera was saying, and then like I definitely agree that language can be a way of rebellion as well, and languages sometimes are born out of like this adherence to or away from a dominating culture and kind of like adhering to the roots of where you come from. There are some even languages like Patois that kind of use all types of influences. And I think like the point that Edward Galeano is trying to say isn't so much like the adherence to syntax and semantics and rules, more as like the esoteric soul rules, what the soul is trying to say. And I think that I think there's a different way that you can say, like, you can think of word not so much as like a word that you say in a sentence, but like the word as in a promise that you make either to yourself or maybe to the people that you identify with, the titles that you may want to establish, like the word of a poet, everything that represents. I feel like those kind of overlap, and also trump just speaking impeccably in terms of like proper established rules.
Yeah, totally. I feel like we're all kind of starting to go in that same sort of understanding, right, of words and language. Thank you, Mao, for your addition and your thoughts. I saw Kathy and then Ayan. So Kathy.
Oh no, I was just I hit it when I wrote it in the chat about our sound matching my soul, matching what I'm trying to say. I think, and if we go into, and I don't want to put words in Tina's mouth, but but I'm going to do it. No, I'm going to put words in there. No, when she's talking about the agitation, it's more of the using of the word from a disconnected place. So like our brain sometimes just says or speaks, or when we're disconnected from ourselves, it could still be supposedly, but how am I using supposedly? Am I, is the energy matching what I'm trying to say, or am I disconnected from what's being conveyed? That's kind of where I was going in my brain with all of this.
No, I really like that, because I think that it is really important for us to think about, again, as writers, right? Because as writers, we have to be like on point all the time with our words when we're writing, or else we're just not going to be effective. And I do really like the way that you put it in the chat, is, in that idea of is the sound of the word matching the sound of my soul? I think that's a great great way to articulate that for sure. Ayan?
Yeah, I think this is super, super interesting, just that like the different places we've gone with this. I just wanted to like add something else because I also wonder about the like more like historical political context around this writing, because I started thinking about the relationship between like Eduardo as like born in the 1940s, and then talking about like an indigenous community in South America. And it turns out he actually wrote a book about like imperialism and colonialism in South America. I just Googled him. It makes me think about also like people brought this up already about like who has responsibility with their words, like who has the responsibility to be mindful. And it just makes me think also about like the history of like nations lying to indigenous communities, right? Putting things on paper and then turning around and like just deceiving with their words, right? So it makes me think about that too, about I think this idea about like who has responsibility to be true and honest with their words, and when it plays out on this like larger scale, the kind of like ramifications of that, which is I think what also has been being brought up with like Vero and Catherine, the kind of like it becomes individual too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You know, and Ayan is correct in that, you know, Eduardo Galeano, he doesn't, all the stuff that I've ever read by Eduardo Galeano, that it's never by accident, right? There's a very clear intention behind the words that he's using, which definitely, you know, speaks to what was written now, right? Like it's him essentially trying to articulate what is justice and what is injustice, and what it means to witness to history and to, you know, the hopefully, you know, future, right? So I highly recommend him regardless of this conversation, and I think that the I'm glad that y'all are sharing the titles of the books, but I think that definitely, you know, we all obviously care about writing and the word specifically and what it means to us, and that particular concern, right, is I think a very important thing that we need to articulate at some point through this process of exploring the concept of caregiving, right? Our theme is caregiving, and it can't really, I think, be well expressed without us thinking about all the different ways in which that manifests. So, Ms. Luz, I see you have your hand up, and then we'll move on after your comment. Ms. Luz.
Well, this conversation reminded me of when I first did my first 10-day silent retreat. Before they send you home, they they do a day of what they call noble speech, which is a transition day from going from total silence to, you know, going back home. And the idea is just to, you know, well, it's kind of a buffer from, you know, having been inside of yourself that whole time and then re-encountering the world. You get to share with everybody else on the retreat. So I was floored. I literally felt the energy coming out of my mouth when I first spoke. And I was also very drained after I spoke, because I just I had no idea how much energy is involved in speaking. When you've been in silence, you just you don't have to use that energy. So then all of a sudden I had to hook up with it again, and then just felt that major connection with the word and with the energy of the word. So that's what this conversation took me to. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Ms. Lewis, because that's absolutely correct. I've personally have had in the past, at least when I was living alone, I've had days where I didn't speak to anyone for hours, um, and I mean, I did have music going on and everything, and I was enjoying the word in that way, but I do remember what that felt like, spending hours just being silent and listening as opposed to speaking. And I do think that there's a lot to be said about our efforts in trying to be articulate and really trying to effectively communicate, and that's whether you are just simply having a conversation with someone, and if you're writing. And I think Kathy definitely gave it a great context, and maybe we might slip up in the way we pronounce something, or we might not even realize that we're mispronouncing something, if we're maybe disconnected from ourselves, if we're not really being accurate in what we want to say, and aren't even conscious of that inaccuracy. So I think that overall, as writers, we do bear that responsibility, and it's why we're writers. It's because we care about the word. And I've brought up the word care a lot, and its definition. I've alluded to it, but let's really get into this, because I really found it really interesting when I looked up the proper definition for care. And this speaks to the difference between an annotation and a connotation. Like I mentioned before, a connotation is the implied meaning. When we talk about care and caregiving, the implied meaning is, that we're doing it out of love, or we're doing it, because we have empathy. But the term care itself has a fascinating definition. And I actually copy and pasted all 6 of them. The first one is suffering of mind, or grief. In Spanish, we would say pena. And the term pena in Spanish in particular, can also mean other things too, like shame or a burden. So that to me is a very interesting way of defining cuidado, or care. But it's a suffering of mind, in its original definition. The second is a 2-part one. First one, 2A, a disquieted state of mixed uncertainty, apprehension, and responsibility. Also, something that causes such a state, a particular worry or concern, etc. It's also 2B, right? A cause for such anxiety. So care, or a care, can create a state of mixed uncertainty, apprehension, and responsibility. So all these different emotions all working in tandem with each other to make us feel uncomfortable in a mental way, right? That's what a care is. It's also like how most of us might interpret care: painstaking or watchful attention. To care is to perhaps even, watch over someone or something, right? It's a painstaking and very attentive way of observing. Also interpreted perhaps as maintenance, right? Like, you think of a doctor, you think of a nurse, and they provide a form of maintenance of health and well-being. Number 4, it's regard coming from desire or esteem. In this sense, the term regard is really talking about, the way in which you might treat someone. So the treatment, right? A care is also a charge or a supervision, right? Something that you feel responsible for, right? It's the responsibility for or attention to health, well-being, and safety. And of course, the last one, number 6, a person or thing that is an object of attention, anxiety, or solicitude, right? So, all of them basically say the same thing, in slightly different ways. But ultimately, what a care is us as individuals essentially using our entire range of emotion to provide for another. And when I was really looking at that definition, I couldn't help but think that, as poets, that's something that we do, not just for the sake of our writing, but for the sake of even representing the things that we care about, like social injustices, or the representation of our culture, or just simply our own personal well-being, which are a lot of the reasons why people write, for the sake of others, as Mauricio said. That is, I think, a way of describing care. It's for the sake of others. I see a lot of wows there. But what do y'all think about that definition of care?
I think the way that you read it, I had a better concept. Because when I read it,
Well, I'm glad that speaking it out loud made it a little bit clearer. I see a hand
that's what it's
raised.
all about.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that. How do you say? Gives the foundation to the lesson.
Yeah.
Because even in our writing, some of us are lazy writers, especially if you're going to write a book or write a play, and you got to think about what the other person needs to hear and not what you're thinking, because you'll leave out the important parts, and it'll leave them puzzled. So you have to really lay it out straight for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean it's a big responsibility as a writer. I see the hand raised from Miss Luz and Mauricio. Miss Luz. You're on mute, Miss Luz. I'm not sure if.
I think my hand was raised the last time and it just never got unraised.
Okay. But did you have any thoughts on the concept of care, perhaps?
I just remember studying the word in nursing school, and it was we nitpicked it to death. So it is actually the one skill that nursing is professionally responsible for, because that's we carve out our niche with the caring part. We're medically trained, but caring is, I guess, our specialty. So I just remember studying it very hard, and thinking, and I guess trying to establish a profession behind that word is a challenge, because obviously, to be a professional at something, you have to have the skill, and I guess caring is no. So basically, what the profession established is care plans. So our in order to care, we have to plan for the care and establish the plan and evaluate the plan. So caring is a very important word. So I'm very happy that you're going into the intricacies of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can imagine, especially with nursing as a profession, and it basically almost like professionalized care is how I'm interpreting what you're sharing, Ms. Luz, and that's an interesting way of looking at the concept of care, right? Thank you for sharing that.
You're quite welcome.
Mauricio?
I like that. To me, this conversation brought up the case for suffering, because from what I gathered, you can't care about something without an ounce of suffering or feeling any sort of way towards the object of, or the person that you care about. And I don't mean suffering in such a negative connotation either. It's suffering in terms of feeling something that is outside of you, almost inward. Whereas you care for someone, you almost take on their pain, or you feel something for them. Empathy, to me, is like taking on more than just what you need for your own self. And I think, to me, I really enjoyed this conversation because it's really just helped me kind of put to words how I felt about, like, you know, when I feel almost physically hurt when I hear about like things that happen to the environment or to other people in the news, or maybe a natural disaster, something that maybe isn't mainstream, or, you know, wars in Syria, and you feel something. And I think, at least here in the West, or maybe even just here in LA, we've kind of been conditioned to only think good, positive vibes and think of your own lives and kind of promote yourself, which is good. But to me, it's like it's got to be for something else. Like, yeah, you got to get yourself right too, but to what end? Like, to me, at least for me, my goal would be maybe get myself right so that I can go out and give more of my heart and care to other things and other causes that need it. So I think this definitely like gave me more like verbal ammunition to say no, like it's okay for me to feel this grief, because it just shows that you care for things other than yourself.
Amen.
Yeah, it's an interesting dichotomy, I want to say. Maybe not a dichotomy, but it is kind of like a paradox, right? You can't necessarily say that you care about something without feeling grief for that same thing. You know, you that like symbiosis of the two ideas. You know, it obviously reinforces the idea that they're not mutually exclusive, right? You care because you feel, you know, pena. You care because you feel, you know, the empathy that you feel, or the sympathy that you feel. It's definitely an interesting way to understand this concept that we're attempting to write about. So I think that, you know, it at least hopefully frames for us the motivations why we write the things that we write. And, you know, being true to our word, as Eduardo Galeano is kind of trying to illustrate, and as we've been talking about, you know, that means that there is a certain level of worry that we're going to have as we begin articulating these things that we care about. So, you know, I wanted to just obviously, you know, bring to you all this concept, and you know, give you at least something to think about as now we read our poem of the week. And as we go back to our handout here, I present to you Adiós a la casa, or Goodbye to the House. This is by Octavio Paz, who was born the 31st of March in 1914 and passed away the 19th of April in 1998. He was a Mexican poet and a diplomat. He's also a Nobel Prize winner. He won, I believe, twice, if I remember correctly. And this specifically comes from, since I'm sharing the books some of the books that I got while in Mexico. This one comes from this particular book. I don't know if y'all can see that too well. It's called Libertad bajo palabra, and this particular edition is an edition that has all the different like iterations of this particular book. But Libertad bajo palabra is the book that this one came from. How many books did I pick up? A lot. Basically enough to where we had to buy a second smaller luggage to carry all the books back, as well as all the bottles of tequila and stuff that we bought. But that's neither here nor there. Exactly, a poet at a different country. In a different country. All right, so do I have any volunteers that might be interested in reading for us? Either the English version or the Spanish version.
I'll try the English,
All right.
but I'll stop when I'm exhausted, and someone else can take over.
Okay, that sounds good. So, Miss
Okay.
Lois, we'll let you get us going with the English one first.
Okay, let me get a little bit closer. It is the early morning. I want to say goodbye to this tiny world, only true world. Goodbye to this sad opening of eyes of the day that rise. Sleep flees bundle up from the scene of its crime, and the soul is an abandoned place. Goodbye to the chair where I nightly hung my suit, the daily lunching, and the couch rocking my, was that asomia?
Insomnia.
Okay. A crate that was neither split by lightning nor carved by water. Goodbye to the truthful mirror where I left my mask to descend into the depths of the endlessness, and I never descended. You have no depth, only a surface. Oh, that's a question. Only a surface? Goodbye to the windows of minimal sky and the fog that blindly climbs the foothill pasture that fades away. To the cotton balls dress, the plum tree. Say goodbye, and to that bird that is a bit of breeze in a branch. Say goodbye to the river. Your waters always were, for me, the same waters. Girl, woman, ghost of the edge, forever tell you goodbye, like how the river says it to the riverbank. Okay, that's enough.
You're so close, Miss Lois.
Oh, it's only one. Oh, okay, one. Okay.
Push it.
In a never-ending farewell, I would like to say goodbye to these spirits, tomorrow's memories, but I am afraid they'll awaken and say goodbye to me.
Excellent. Thank you, Miss Lois. Push through. All right. And in Spanish, I saw a couple of hands raised. Either Miss Luz or Mauricio.
I vote for Miss Luz.
All right. Miss Luz.
I'm not on my laptop. I'm on my cell phone, and I can't read it in those tiny letters. Sorry, Mom. You're up.
All right, Mal. It's on you then.
Es en la madrugada. Quiero decir adiós a este pequeño mundo, único mundo verdadero. Adiós a este penoso abrir los ojos del día que se levanta. El sueño huye embosado del lugar de su crimen y el alma es una plaza abandonada. Adiós a la silla donde colgué mi traje cada noche, ahorcado, cotidiano, y al sillón, roca mi insomnia, peña que no abrió el rayo ni el agua agrietó. Adiós al espejo verídico donde dejé mi máscara por descender al fondo del sinfín y nunca descendí. ¿No tienes fondo? ¿Solo superficie? Adiós al poco cielo de la ventana y a la niebla que sube a ciegas la colina, rebaño que se desvanece. Al vestido de copos, el ciruelo, decirle adiós, y a ese pájaro que es un poco de brisa en una rama. Decirle adiós al río, tus aguas siempre fueron para mí las mismas aguas. Niña, mujer, fantasma de la orilla, decirte siempre adiós, como el río se lo dice a la ribera, en una interminable despedida. Quisiera decir adiós a estas presencias, memorias de mañana, pero tengo miedo que despierten y me digan adiós.
Excellent. Thank you, Mauricio. And let me see. Let me put in the Verdad bajo palabra. So there's the name of the book, if in case any of you are interested. Octavio Paz. Yeah. So first impressions, right? I like to get everyone's first impressions before we do the deep dive. But what did y'all think of the poem?
I liked it.
Saw some thumbs up, some head nods. Thumbs up. Miss Michelle? Raise your hand.
I have, because I'm being reminded of my employment right now where I work at my facility. As you know, Louise, we did lose someone. I mean, 2 weeks ago, or really recently, we did lose someone. He passed away due to injury. And it just makes me think of the seniors, everybody that we're taking care of, all of them. Unfortunately, where I work at now is a COVID camp. There are 7 seniors who have COVID now, 5 employees, 5 associates, meaning people who don't work, who do not give direct care. That's a total of 10 people who are out. And like one by one, and every Tuesday we have to do mandatory PCR nasal testing. So when I think about who left last year due to COVID, I'm reminded of these seniors who live and how they are regarding the lives they have lived, and spiritual awakening are being stunned. It's a beautiful poem. It's a bittersweet poem. Want to embrace your senior relatives as you can, because you never know from anybody. When you see seniors every day, and when you work with them, like I do, it just makes me appreciate seniors at their age, because they can tell stories also, and that's never a dull moment. And because of the COVID situation, no seniors, with the exception of right now, they cannot have visitors or any activities. So this is a cycle. Hopefully this will stop, but I don't know. Scary out there too. Death. Never know.
Yeah, well, thanks, Miss Michelle.
The last night. I left the last night
Okay.
about the spiritual awakening me, because we don't know. I
Yeah.
thought, wow, that's quite interesting.
Yeah, you were breaking in in and out a little bit there, Miss Michelle. So it's a little. Hold on.
A little, you could. Do I sound choppy?
Yeah.
Do I
yeah,
sound
just,
choppy?
Just a little bit. There was
I
a
do,
little
don't I?
choppiness.
I'll put it in the chat. I'll do that.
Okay. Yeah,
I'll
and
put it
from the little bit that I was able to understand from what Miss Michelle was saying. There we go. From the little bit that I was able to catch, it sounded to me like Miss Michelle was able to relate it to her job as a caretaker, working with seniors, and I think that there's definitely a bit of like that sense of wanting to care for another in this poem. At least that's kind of what I get from it. But other people's thoughts, what were y'all thinking as you heard the poem the first time around? Abraham, and then Mauricio.
I think Luz was first. Luz, do you want to say something before? Or maybe not.
No, I'm
Oh,
still
kind of
reading the
like
poem
the
again. I don't know why my
repetition
hand is
that
continually raised.
Yeah.
I think you're doing that on purpose, Luis.
That's not me, but go ahead, Abraham. Though, go ahead.
Oh, so I do like the repetition where it says adios, like say goodbye or goodbye. because it gives you a breather to start again the list of things that you're gonna miss. And in my the way I saw it is somebody's gonna die who's dead. Basically, is the person naming all these things. It's not talking for somebody else. And at the end you can see a little fear of what's next because there's not gonna be tomorrow. So that's pretty neat.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation. I definitely caught on the repetition of adios or goodbye. That's a technique for sure in poetry. But Mauricio?
I really liked it. I got a sense that wherever the whether it was Octavio or the narrator was a very sedentary location. It looked like he was writing about the things that were directly in front of him. So like the chair, the mirror, the window. So it seemed to me like it could have been like in his room, in his last resting place. Maybe he was maybe a few days or hours before his death, and he's kind of remembering how all of those daily mundane objects represented to him. And I really like the line, like the daily lynching, or when he's talking about his chair, when he nightly hung my suit. Just that wordplay is very vivid. And also the mirror, and where he left my mask to descend into the depths of endlessness. It's just like spirit Octavio Paz right there.
Yeah, there's definitely some very strong imagery. I'll leave it at that right now. I see Kathy raise her hand. Kathy?
I was getting, I do get the death vibe, and I'm with you there, but I'm also getting a sense of retirement or movement into something else. And because there's a little bit of that, and I fear that when the spirits awaken, they will, was the word? They will say goodbye to me, meaning that he'll be left all alone. So like he's letting go of whatever life he has now into this new life, and he's scared that he's going to be complete loneliness. It could also be the deep void that we don't know what's going to happen after we die. But I just thought it could be another perception.
Yeah, I mean, because it's a poem, right? There's a lot of ways of interpreting it. And I think that it's definitely to our benefit, right? To study the poem, to get at least a sense of what objects or what ideas or concepts are important for this particular speaker of the poem, right? I see Miss Michelle wrote, I liked the concluding stanza about spirits awakening, and you don't know if they will awaken me. The repetition of goodbye reflects an ending and also a beginning that life is gone. The clothing items are symbols of his life too. And Ayan wrote, I like that a lot, Michelle. The goodbye is an end and a beginning. I agree. I actually very much agree with that. Let me read the poem to you all one more time. This time we'll just go all the way through. We'll read it in the original Spanish first, and then I'll read it for you in my translation into English. Adiós a la casa. Es en la madrugada. Quiero decir adiós a este pequeño mundo, único mundo verdadero. Adiós a este penoso abrir los ojos del día que se levanta. El sueño huye, embosado, del lugar de su crimen, y el alma es una plaza abandonada. Adiós a la silla, donde colgué mi traje cada noche, ahorcado cotidiano, y al sillón, roca en mi insomnio, peña que no abrió el rayo, ni el agua agrietó. Adiós al espejo verídico, donde dejé mi máscara, por descender al fondo del sinfín, y nunca descendí. ¿No tienes fondo, solo superficie? Adiós al poco cielo de la ventana y a la niebla que sube a ciegas la colina, rebaño que se desvanece. Al vestido de copos, el ciruelo, decirle adiós, y a ese pájaro que es un poco de brisa en una rama, decirle adiós al río. Tus aguas siempre fueron para mí las mismas aguas. Niña, mujer, fantasma de la orilla, decirte siempre adiós como el río se lo dice a la ribera en un interminable despedida. Quisiera decir adiós a estas presencias, memorias de mañana, pero tengo miedo que despierten y me digan adiós. All right. Now, in English, goodbye to the house. It is the early morning. I want to say goodbye to this tiny world, only true world. Goodbye to this sad opening of eyes of the day that rises. Sleep flees, bundled up from the scene of its crime, and the soul is in an abandoned place. Goodbye to the chair where I nightly hung my suit, the daily lynching, and the couch, rock in my insomnia, crag that was neither split by lightning nor carved by water. Goodbye to the truthful mirror, where I left my mask, to descend into the depths of endlessness, and I never descended. You have no depths, only a surface. Goodbye to the window's minimal sky, and the fog that blindly climbs the foothill, pasture that fades away. To the cotton ball dress, the plum tree, say goodbye, and to that bird that is a bit of breeze in a branch. Say goodbye to the river. Your waters always were, for me, the same waters. Girl, woman, ghost of the edge, forever tell you goodbye, like how the river says it to the riverbank in a never-ending farewell. I would like to say goodbye to these spirits, tomorrow's memories, but I'm afraid they'll awaken and say goodbye to me. I'm glad that Miss Michelle feels reminded of her work. I was thinking writing, but I guess you mean your job. Is there a hand raised from Kathy? Is there another thought that came to mind as I read it?
Okay, when you read it, I got a whole nother vibe. I got two vibes. The first one was murder of some sort. I don't know where it came from. Maybe it was the way he was. And then the second one was dementia.
That's interesting. Dementia. And murder, I guess. That's also interesting. Miss Luz? For real this time?
Well, this really took me to a teaching that is very a basic teaching of the Buddhist philosophy is impermanence. And so it seems to me like a good exercise of impermanence, to say goodbye to things, but also to be very present and mindful of the things that are around you in order to see how you abide in them or abide with them, and to be so present as to greet them and to say goodbye to them. So, yeah, for me, this would be called impermanence.
Impermanence. I like that. Ani, I see that you raised your hand as well.
I see that there's two kind of forces pulling at each other. So he says, I want to say goodbye, but then there's a sentimentality and an attachment to these things that are comfortable, that are, you know, very familiar. Um, so it's like it's I want to, but I don't want to, you know, and maybe it's more like needing to break out of this little world where he's very comfortable. But then, you know, like this desire to be more, to have a bigger life, to have to break away and challenge himself, but at the same time it's like he's found a place where he's comfortable. And when the last stanza that says, girl, woman, ghost of the edge, forever tell you goodbye, like how the river says it to the riverbank, a never ending farewell. Um, it's not a forever goodbye that he's wishing for. It's you know, the river and the riverbank are constantly, you know, parting and rejoining, kissing each other in a way, you know, the water kissing the shore, and then receding and coming back. And so it doesn't feel like a forever, like dying kind of goodbye. It feels like there's a very strong attachment to this place and to a familiar way of being, and you know, wanting to leave so that coming back can be sweeter or different, or I'm not sure. It's there's a lot of beautiful images here. It definitely warrants more study. But anyway, those are my first impressions.
Excellent. Yeah, those are definitely some good, strong first impressions. Let me tell you what this poem said to me the first time that I read it. It reminded me of what my dad and my mom used to do when I was little before they left for work. I remember them quietly walking around, quietly making their morning coffee, quietly making, in the case of my mom, you know, burritos for my dad to take. I remember her quietly pulling the aluminum foil off of the roll, you know, tearing it as silently as she could so that she could roll up my dad's lunch, you know, and both of them leaving without trying, without deliberately waking us up, right? Me and my brother. For me, it's a despedida, but not a farewell, right? It is adios a la casa. It's saying goodbye to the house, but like Ani says, you know, it's knowing that they're going to return, right? For me, that's where that imagery of the river and the riverbank, you know, saying goodbye always, right? Like this cycle of goodbye, because there's a chance of, you know, coming back. For me, the key things that led me to get that interpretation of a person leaving for work is that, one, it's early in the morning, es en la madrugada, and then two, it's the forever goodbye to the girl, the woman, the ghost of the edge. You know, those two key phrases or sections, you know, for me, really reinforce that idea that, you know, they're coming back, right? And the reference to the suit, the coat that gets hung every day, you know, that daily lynching is talking about, you know, the suit that he has to wear to work. You know, the mirror and the taking off of the mask, you know, to descend into the deep. You know, we have to wear a mask in everyday society, and you know, the speaker was hoping, right, in being home, that they would be able to go a little bit further into whatever they wanted. So there's I think a lot of references. They're sort of metaphorical or veiled references to the idea of leaving for work and coming back home to a place that's more like a place of solace. So those are the things that came to mind when I first read this poem. But I think that in the context of the definition of care, There's a lot of things that this particular speaker of the poem cares about, aren't there? I see some head nods. Yeah. What are the things that they care about? What do we infer from the poem? And remember, care is not just like love and empathy, but it's also, their griefs, their worries. There's nature, right? There's a caring for nature. The little things in life.
Well, I think someone pointed out a while ago about the things that was mentioned, the window, the mirror, lying the suit on the suit on the chair. And so these are things that he cares about. And it's like, you could say it was a memoir or a journal. I mean, I'm just sitting back listening because everybody has such a strong, seem like a concept of what's going on. I mean, and the last person just spoke says, that was her first impression. You said it was a great one, but wow, like she said, I mean, if we could just really study this, I mean, we could get a lot of more information out of it. Because I'm just sitting back and I'm just grasping everything that everybody is saying, and it's great. I mean, everything seems so. Going back to the words, the wording is how do you say a word in time, on time? Yeah, everything has a positive meaning for me.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, everything has a significance to it, right? The things that he chose to include in this poem are his cares, right? And remember again, care is not just something that you feel affection for or have a regard for because you want to, serve it. There are also things that create worry. There are also things that create anxiety, like a job, like being authentic, like enjoying nature. But not being able to, like those are cares.
Well, like someone said about how the ocean comes up and then it goes back out, and so that I like the way that concept was brought in as well, and so that's where life is. Sometimes it gets repetitious for us. I get up in the morning, I brush my teeth, I fix my cereal, blah, 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 blah. And then the next day, the same thing. But each day you might do it a little different, even though you do the same thing. So even though it's repetitious, it's still, how do you say, you look forward to it. I look forward to my oatmeal and my raisins in the morning. I mean, it tastes good,
Good.
It's a repetitious, but each morning it actually tastes different. It's good, but it still tastes different, a little bit more cinnamon, a little less cinnamon, but so the repetition of what she said about how the water comes up and then it goes back, so he wakes up in the morning, he goes to sleep, the next morning the same thing. So these are things that he's like reminiscing about. Yeah.
I mean, he's contemplating all of these things, right? And he contemplates them because he cares about them.
But everything we're saying is true, but they're all different. That's what I'm trying to, bring out. Even though we're saying this, reading the same poem, but everything that we're saying, even though it's a possible, what is the word that Miss Tina say? The word possibly.
Supposedly.
It's all true, but it's different.
Yeah.
But true.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm glad that you enjoyed our interpretations, and we have about 10 minutes left, but and we went a little longer than I had hoped to, but at least in the discussion. But I want to make sure that y'all have a chance right now to contemplate your cares. So I'm gonna give everybody about 5 minutes, and if you want to put them in the chat, you're welcome to. If not, that's okay too. But for the next about 5 minutes, create a list of the items or objects that symbolize your cares. Any questions?
Can they be human or just objects?
Human is fine. Although, if you can, right, push for the object that represents
Okay.
that human.
Oh, okay.
So
Well, I'm gonna have to
objects,
say,
things
yeah.
that represent your cares. So make a little list. Like I said, feel free to put them in the chat or just write them down for yourself. This will help you with your homework.
And so, what is our homework?
Your homework is going to be to write a poem about your cares.
Okay. So I have to say good night.
All right, Miss Lois.
Yes,
It's good to see you.
I've already been summoned.
Okay.
Pre-broadcasting program.
All right. Take care.
God
Miss
bless
Lois.
all of you.
Take
Have
care.
a nice week.
Bye.
And I'm Miss Lois.
Good night.
Luis, can you repeat that?
Yeah.
The instruction. Write a list of like the
Of objects.
non.
Yeah. Of objects or things that represent your cares. And remember, a care is more than just something that you love, right? It can be an anxiety, it can be a worry. We're talking, the definition that I provided for care. It's items, objects that represent your cares. All right, one more minute, y'all. All right, everyone. So go ahead and start wrapping up that last thought. I'm sure there's more objects that will come to mind. For those of you that listed either just general objects or had maybe a hard time thinking of an object but still managed to write down a concept like family, what your assignment is going to be is really to be a bit more specific now. So if you did write, sort of general objects, now I'm going to charge you with the task of writing a poem that places the objects in situations that symbolize your care. So think of the suit that is draped or hung on the chair in the poem by Octavio Paz. Right? He calls it a daily lynching. The fact that the suit is hung on the chair is really a metaphor for his job, right? The thing that he has to wear to be out in society. So as you write your poem for this upcoming week, remember next week we're going to have a workshop session. Your poem, should explore the objects that, again, represent your cares in this world. You can frame it as like a goodbye, as the poem did, and you leaving for work, and all the cares that are represented to you as you leave for work. It's really going to be up to you and how you approach this poem, but ultimately your homework is to really push the metaphor of your cares through these objects. All right. Glad that y'all are still adding stuff there in the chat. Hopefully that helps the rest of you, kind of get ideas. But does anyone have any questions? Is the homework pretty clear? I see some head nodding.
So I had a question.
Yes.
So say I don't know, and as an example, you want to write about your care of the homeless, or maybe you may have a handwritten letter from someone who was homeless that you helped out. That could be the item that kind of represents all of that, encompasses that, right?
Yeah, could be something like that. Or another, for that particular one, homelessness, for me, that actually makes me think of when my dad was technically homeless and was living out of a camper. So that specific camper that I remember my dad sleeping in, that was, for me, a symbol of homelessness. And definitely is one of the cares that I have. I think that's an important thing for us to all work for. But yeah, hopefully that kind of helps.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions? Is the assignment pretty clear? Is van life. All right. So with that, Miss Michelle, did you have a question? Okay, I guess not. I'm getting some feedback there. All right, so with that, here collectibles. All right, so with that, we will say good night. I hope y'all have a good rest of your week. Those of you that are in the mentorship program, I'll see you tomorrow. We'll have a lesson on how to develop an artist project. And again, if you all have any questions or anything, you can always use our Google Classroom as a space to share your questions and get answers that everyone is able to see if it relates to everyone. And definitely make sure that you use it as a place to upload your assignments, so that way Abraham and myself can give you feedback either in advance, or we can present for you during the workshop sessions if it makes it easier. So that's it. Take care, everyone. Have a good night. Bye.
Thank you, Louis. Thank you.